Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're dropping you straight onto a literally bloody crime scene on a mythological mountain peak. We're unpacking a fascinating sequence of events from ancient texts that completely flips our understanding of crime, punishment, and cosmic destiny upside down. We'll be looking at a story involving the legendary Pandava brothers, a mountaintop massacre, and a divine wrath that ends in the most unexpected way possible. So let's jump right in.
Now, this reprimand right here brilliantly establishes our immediate conflict. We have a virtuous king, Yudhishthira, fiercely scolding his incredibly strong brother Bhima for a horrific act of violence. You see, Yudhishthira and his entourage have just climbed to the summit of the Gandhamadana mountain, and they're filled with intense anxiety because of these terrifying sounds echoing through the caves. And what they find at the top is exactly what prompts this harsh condemnation.
Picture this grim visual that the Pandavas just stumbled upon. Imagine the mighty Bhima Sena, looking almost like a war god after a brutal battle, surrounded by the slaughtered, massive bodies of Rakshasa and Yaksha warriors. These literal monsters are just weltering on the ground, having been struck down single-handedly by Bhima. And, well, the Pandavas are relieved their brother is alive, obviously, but that relief is immediately swallowed by a crushing dread over the wrath they had surely just invited by killing these supernatural beings.
Which brings us to Section 1, A Brother's Reprimand, Yudhishthira's Anger. Let's see why this massacre was viewed as an absolute moral disaster.
The crucial point to understand here is Yudhishthira's strict adherence to duty. Remember, at this point in their story, the Pandavas are supposed to be leading the peaceful lives of anchorites or ascetics. Yudhishthira completely believes that unprovoked slaughter violates that vow. He tells Bhima that disregarding duty for a rash, impulsive act is a surefire way to offend the gods. In his eyes, Bhima hasn't just killed some monsters, he's practically doomed the entire family to reap the terrible fruits of a profoundly sinful action.
Moving to Section 2, The Lord of Wealth, Kuvera arrives. Yudhishthira's fears are actually already coming true as the surviving monsters flee in absolute terror to report this slaughter.
We really have to understand exactly who Bhima just angered here. Kuvera, also known as Vaisravana, is the divine lord of wealth and the king of the Yakshas. Basically, he is a divine force you absolutely do not want to cross. And to make matters worse, Bhima didn't just kill anonymous foot soldiers, he killed Maniman, a prominent monster and a personal friend of Kuvera.
Step by step, Kuvera's descent from the sky builds this sense of inescapable doom. The sources describe Kuvera's eyes reddening in anger the very moment he hears of this trespassing mortal. He immediately summons his divine flying chariot, the Pushpaka, yokes his golden horses that speed like the wind, and descends upon the mountain, accompanied by 1,000 massive sword-wielding Yaksha warriors. Their golden armor is just flashing in the light. Seeing this overwhelming force darken the sky, the terrified Pandavas think their end is literally come, and they immediately bow down with joined hands.
But here's where our explainer takes a wild turn. Look at this incredible paradox. On one side, we have the terrified mortals, convinced they've transgressed and are about to be wiped out. But on the other side, the supposedly vengeful god, Kuvera, arrives completely delighted. He's perfectly pleased at heart. The sources specifically note that he and his celestial army stand there entirely free from anger or agitation.
So, into Section 3, a surprising twist, destiny revealed. We have to unpack this. Why in the world would a divine king be perfectly happy that his close friend and a huge chunk of his army were just brutally slaughtered?
Kuvera's own words are the absolute key to this mystery. He looks right at the terrified King Yudhishthira and completely absolves Bhima of guilt. He says, these Yakshas and Rakshasas had already been slain by destiny. Bhima, in Kuvera's eyes, wasn't a murderer. He was simply the instrument of a cosmic design. Kuvera actually tells them not to feel any shame for the act, because this destruction had been foreseen and preordained by the gods themselves.
Let's look at Section 4, The Sage's Terrible Curse. To understand why this bloody event was preordained, we have to dive into a bizarre incident from long ago at a place called Kusastali.
To set the scene, Kuvera describes traveling to a conclave of the gods, and he wasn't traveling lightly. 300 Mahapadmas. That massive number represents the sheer scale of the grim-visaged Yaksha army that was traveling with Kuvera that day. It was an overwhelming display of divine power and wealth. But, as you'll see, all that power couldn't stop what happened next.
Following this timeline, it becomes astonishingly clear how a single, incredibly stupid insult centuries ago led directly to today's mountain massacre.
As Kuvera flew overhead, his friend Maniman, in a move of pure, baffling ignorance, dropped excrement onto the crown of a meditating, highly powerful sage named Agastya. Instantly, the furious sage cursed Maniman. He declared that because of this terrible insult, Maniman and his forces would meet their absolute destruction at the hands of a mortal.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, the Instrument of Destiny, Fulfilling Prophecy. Let's bring this all together to see how Bhima's perceived sin was actually an act of cosmic justice.
The sage's curse came with very specific conditions. Maniman had to die, yes, but it had to be by a mortal's hand. And more importantly for Kuvera, the sage declared that Kuvera himself would be distressed by his fallen soldiers, but would be instantly freed from the shared sin of his army the very moment he laid eyes upon that specific mortal. Bhima perfectly executed every single requirement of this ancient prophecy. By doing so, he completely recontextualized his violent outburst. It wasn't a crime, it was literal divine salvation for Kuvera.
I want to leave you with this lingering thought from our explainer today. We started with a king berating his brother for a seemingly horrific crime, only to discover that the crime was actually a cure to an ancient curse. When we look at Bhima's violent actions through the lens of cosmic destiny, who is really holding the weapon? I mean, is it the man swinging the mace, or is it the invisible hand of fate guiding him? It completely challenges us to think about the nature of our own choices, our own mistakes, and the unseen tapestry of events we might unknowingly be a part of. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep questioning the story behind the story.